Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing great. I am Salvi and I'll be your MC for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome our panelists. Yang berbahagia Prof. Dato IR Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Prof. Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, Chief Scientist Officer Cancer Research Malaysia. Thomas Zhao, founding partner of the Gobi Partners, and our host, Zulera Abu Bakar, CEO of Maranti. Esteemed guests of honor, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Maranti Branch Series 1 2022. As most of you know, the Malaysian Research Accelerator for Technology and Innovation, Maranti, a recently launched agency under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, MOSTI, sets our mission to drive higher return on ideas in the research and development to commercialization space. This agency is a convergence of Technology Park Malaysia TPM and the Malaysian Global Innovation and Creativity Center MAGIC. Ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder, for today's event, there will be two separate sessions, including the first session is the forum, and the second session will be the breakout session. As for the forum, it is outcome and impact focused and provides intentionality for innovators while welcoming prospective investors. It is built on a collaborative ecosystem connecting enterprises to smart partnerships and expert resources. Meanwhile, the breakout session will address three focus areas, which are IP commercialization, market access, and talent in identifying potential challenges and outlining potential solutions in order to identify support and intervention required by industry and academia. So for those who have registered for the breakout sessions, please check your email for the Zoom link. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I am honored to welcome Puan Zulera Abu Bakar, our CEO of Maranti, for her opening remarks. Ideas to Impact with Maranti. Madam Zulera, the digital stage is yours.
Yang berbahagia Prof. Dato Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor University Malaya. Yang berbahagia Prof. Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, Chief Scientist Officer, Cancer Research Malaysia, Mr. Thomas Zhao, founding partner of Gobi Partners, Mr. Ibrahim Sani, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and salam sejahtera. Thank you all for joining us today. In 1985, Dr. Akira Yoshino invented and patented the world's first commercially viable lithium-ion battery, which today powers the mini computers we all have in our pockets. Dr. Yoshino, with Dr. Stanley Whittington and Dr. John Goodenough, was then awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2019. And today, none of us can deny that their research has changed the world. Just a few months ago, Japanese paper producers, Nippon Paper Industries, sparked enormous excitement when they powered a light bulb using a battery made from wood pulp. The battery, which powered a light bulb for about 7 seconds, is made of cellulose, nanofibers refined from wood pulp. It is a watershed moment because a major concern for lithium-ion batteries today is the depletion of world's rare earth resources. The wood pulp battery could signal a revolutionary solution to the environmental concerns of rare earth mining and disposal. This shows that technology is evolving and progressing more quickly than ever. From the time of the earliest Muslim inventors in the Islamic Renaissance, who invented the first hospitals and advanced the studies of science, mathematics, and astronomy, to the making of batteries from just wood pulp, invention is the master key that unlocks human potential. In Malaysia, we have a wealth of talent and innovation. Last year, Cancer Research Malaysia spearheaded the development of a gene bank with more than 1,000 breast cancer profiles from across Asia. With this, deeper research into the factors that lead to cancer and the effectiveness of treatments suited for Asians can be advanced. Malaysian company Biogenes also became amongst the first in the world to successfully produce a COVID-19 digital rapid test kits using their proprietary aptamer technology. We also scored our first unicorn startup. Qasim, which entered the world stage valued at 1.75 billion US dollars. Malaysian-born Aerodyne also clinched top spot as the world's top company for drone technologies. Then, 11-year-old Malaysian schoolgirl Mariam Muzame found a use for discarded seafood shells by turning it into a new sustainable livestock feed, winning 3 international awards for her groundbreaking idea. All these bright minds invented new products which are well underway for greater market adoption. They found new ways to do things and engineered breakthroughs to improve lives and leave a positive impact. However, our commercialization rates are still not yet where we want them to be. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past decade, we have dropped in our rankings on the Global Innovation Index, even though we realize that innovation capacity and skills need to be strengthened in order for us to progress. Now, the Malaysian Knowledge Economy study found that every 1% increase in innovation increases wealth by 0.36%. Data shows a gap in our innovation elasticity. Based on this chart by the Malaysian Knowledge Economy Study Phase 3, you can see that GDP growth in Malaysia was significantly lower than its potential output level, with a gap of 49.2%. A joint study in 2021 by the EU Intellectual Property Office and the European Patent Office showed a positive correlation between IP rights and economic performance. It found that IP-owning firms make up a larger proportion of economic activity and employment across Europe. In fact, IPR-intensive industries contribute to 45% of the EU's GDP of 7.9 trillion US dollars. The study also shows that 39% of employment is directly or indirectly attributed to IPR-intensive industries. Now, these industries generate higher wages and greater revenue per employee, especially for small, medium enterprises. In short, increasing innovation increases wealth. Now, just look at the combined market value of the world's 4 innovative companies: Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, as well as Amazon. Their market value is now at 7 trillion US dollars and 2 times the GDP of ASEAN. In just a few decades, the ratio of tangible assets versus intangible assets has also changed for the S&P 500 companies. Before, it was 83% tangible assets versus 17% intangible assets. But today, the ratio has flipped, with intangible assets comprising 90% of the value of a company. The world's wealthiest nations, Switzerland, United States, Denmark, and Singapore, are also the world's most innovative. And they also top quality of life indices. All these examples show how intellectual property is absolutely crucial as a core feed to wealth, with innovation being a highly desirable output from this process. Ladies and gentlemen, recent data from the Malaysian Science and Technology Information Center show that commercialization rates are between 5 to 10%, based on the 8.3% commercialization rate in RMK 9 and 10. This is in spite of the fact that Malaysia has increased its scientific research output by 4.5 times in the last 10 years. China's commercialization rate was at 34.7 in 2020. Korea in 2010, which is 10 years ago, had been at 38.9%, and they have deemed this unsatisfactory. In highly developed economies such as Japan and the USA, the percentage is as high as 60%. Data shows that Malaysia's expenditure for R&D increased, but this is not sufficient to drive growth. Overall, there's been a lack of investment, public and private sector, low investment in high-end R&D, low commercialization, and experimental research. Not to mention poor coordination amongst agencies and other factors that's spinning us down. To be absolutely candid, our ecosystem is still fragmented and unconsolidated. Our ROI is not yet where it can be. Our innovative spirit is sometimes hampered by the lack of funding access, limited resources, including skilled talent, and policies that have yet to catch up to its potential. Many of our research institutes and higher education institutes produce amazing discoveries every year. They publish many research papers and discover great inventions in their labs and R&D facilities. Almost 80% of research today in Malaysia is being conducted in higher learning institutions, with corporates making up about 15% and the remaining 5% coming from the government. But that's where they stay, in the lab and at R&D. Many do not commercialize because they do not have access to funding or expertise to scale, and many struggle to file patents, which can be complex and take years. According to WIPO data, just over 9,000 patent applications were made between 2013 and now. But this is still a fraction of the 120,000 research publications we've produced since 2013. Although Malaysia is ranked amongst the most innovative countries in our category by the Global Innovation Index, we still have a lot of work to do to be among the top 20 in the Global Innovation Index. We want to have 500 products or solutions commercialized through the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox and the Malaysia Commercialization Year by 2025. We aim to increase our GERD to GDP to 2.5% from 1.04% now, and achieve 70% business enterprise expenditure on R&D from 43.9% as a means to strengthen this ecosystem. We also need to see an increase of our researchers from 130 researchers to every 10,000 labor force. A study by Harvard found that innovation capacity is largely determined by the number of scientists and engineers in the country, the stock of knowledge that the society has accrued, the public policy environment, and the maturity of its business clusters. In today's technologically advanced world, a spirit of innovation is the determining factor to staying competitive in the world stage. We need to give rise to a nation full of great ideas and impact. And to do so, we need a holistic ecosystem that fosters innovation from deep within our nation's root. This is where I'm very proud to say that the Malaysian Research Accelerator for Technology and Innovation, or known as MRANTI, is working very hard to make that happen. MRANTI will strive to drive continuous innovation and be the one-stop research commercialization agency with the resources to accelerate the commercialization of innovative ideas and concepts to impact. MRANTI will aim to connect problem statements with solutions. We will connect demand and supply, bridging collaboration between public and private sectors to increase private sector participation, either through market access, investments, advisory, or consultation and facilities for testing and prototyping. Through this, we believe that the national GDP will improve, more jobs will be created, and we can attract more foreign investment to ensure products and solutions are more affordable, available, and accessible towards improving quality of life for all Malaysians, and to ensure Malaysia becomes a high-tech, high-income nation. In a nutshell, we want Malaysia to be better positioned to tackle issues such as low commercialization rate, low gross domestic expenditure to R&D, GERD, low R&D spend by the private sector, and the overlapping roles between government agencies. Now, we have begun our mission to accelerate commercialization of tech and innovation because we want our R&D to shift from focusing on acquiring scientific knowledge to applying it into the real world. Our research needs to fit into solving real problems. Now, MRANTI will take a three-part approach in a transition tunnel as we take our startups, inventors, academic researchers, and our talent with us through this journey of innovation. These include ideation and applied research, prototyping and viability testing, and then scaling up and commercializing. Ideas or solution will be researched to meet industry needs with the view to lead an IP. Then prototypes of these ideas and solutions will be developed and tested for viability before being scaled and manufactured for commercial returns. Ladies and gentlemen, we've already begun our journey. Through MRANTI, you can expect to gain support in terms of integrated infrastructure and advanced facility at the 686-acre MRANTI Park itself. There will be facilities for Center of Excellences, Maker Labs, and much more across the 6 tech cluster areas and parks. We have also designed programs to connect and catalyze collaboration between various parties, academia, innovators, regulators. For example, the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox, which was also launched in 2020, has supported over 140 companies in terms of market validation, regulatory facilitation, funding, and more through the sandbox. We are in the process of upgrading our engineering, IT, biotech, and other building infrastructure at MRANTI Park in order to meet the changing demands of industries and the startup ecosystem. We will also be covering a 4IR hub, which will cover early prototyping, tech immersion programs to our makerspace and the newly launched Area 57, which is the Center of Excellence for Unmanned Autonomous Vehicles or drones. An AI park is also in the works. This will be our foundation for an integrated advanced network of infrastructure facilities. Just like the Maranti tree, Maranti will fast-track Malaysia's innovation ecosystem to stand strong and stand tall amongst the world's best. So this now takes us to the pertinent question. How can we all be part of this journey to a Malaysia that is innovative and unafraid to invent and experiment? We should all ask ourselves, what motivates us to come up with ideas, and how can we think strategically about them? How can we commercialize them? How can we make lives better with it? And if we have that great idea, what's stopping us from making it into a reality? Why are so many of our best inventors, inventions, ideas, and solutions stuck at the nascent stage and never taking flight to the next level? Perhaps it is because we do not know where to start or who to turn to help us take us to that next level. And this is why we exist. This is why Maranti exists, to help us answer these questions. We look forward to listening to your thoughts and ideas during the breakout session later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zulera. Before we begin with our forum session, please direct your attention to the screen for a video prepared by Maranti. Enjoy.
Malaysia entrepreneurs are really very innovative. They're very, very creative.
Compared to other countries like US, Europe, we are comparable. Even some of them is better technology.
If you give them any sort of a problem, they will usually be able to find ways to give you a better set of solution to it.
I think most research, most inventions may actually still be in the lab.
How do we help them to be known by the world? How do we help them to basically scale all the different challenges that you will face, right? How do we get them exported out?
We need more exposure, more support, as well as, I would say, assistance.
We needed the resource that is required for us to be competitive globally.
What is really, really much needed is the way that they're introducing their product and their services to the market.
As an example, I'm doing my algae research here. So algae research actually can benefit not only human being, can benefit to animals, farmer, fishermen.
When we provide digital technology, we are putting in variables that we can control, that can lead to doing things faster, better, cheaper, and safer as well.
So once you have something, you will then have to start contacting all the different bodies so that your project can move forward. There is where we lose time. Of course, you would want it to be out there, to be tested, but that, I would say, is not as straightforward as how you might think it is.
I have seen really cool R&D products, but It never see the light of day, reason being because the inventors are usually not the person that actually understand how it is to run a business.
This is where we would like the government agencies, for example, to come up with a safe space for us to actually explore the potential of our inventions so that it can be brought out further.
For example, provide sandbox so that it allows you to go and operate without needing the compliance of typical regulations.
When all the regulator, policymaker and industry, they work together, we're doing things with more efficient.
It's all about the ecosystem at the end of the day.
Everyone have different expertise, yeah. Like a researcher, we're only expert in the theory, fundamental, while the industry, they understand what is the market, current market, while the policymaker, they understand what is the current policy, the demand, support us in terms of to bring more networking, to bring more entrepreneur and to bring more industry to research institute so that we work together with them so that we can produce a better product.
As a nation that wants to support entrepreneurship, we've got to walk the talk.
If we want to do this, we have to do this now and we have to do this quick. Things are evolving in a very, very fast pace and we don't have time. I say, let's do this.
It's not just about the science, but what's more important now is the usability, whether or not the science can actually give some benefit to the community as well to the world.
All right, the long-awaited moment. We would like to invite Zulera Abu Bakar, the CEO of Maranti, Yang Berbahagia Prof. Dato IR Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, Vice Chancellor University Malaya, Yang Berbahagia Prof. Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, Chief Scientist Officer of Cancer Research Malaysia, and Thomas Zhao, Founding Partner of the Gobi Partners, to begin with our insightful forum session moderated by none other, Ibrahim Sani. Over to you, Ibrahim Sani.
Thank you very much, Salbi. It's actually quite flattering, but Salbi, you're doing a great job as well. Of course, Zera, a very fantastic opening speech. Over the next few, I guess, 1 hour plus, we're going to be unpacking a few things, right? Primarily on how to achieve the kind of ideals and ideas that Maranti is currently targeting. But before we jump to that, let's go through each of our panels right now. We have George Sao, founding partner of Gobi Partners. Everyone is rather familiar with Gobi Partners in Malaysia. There's a lot of work that they're doing. And of course, there's a lot of things that are slated to be done by Gobi Partners. So there's a lot of questions when it comes to product fit. How do they assess particular clients or particular startups, and how do they see the scalability of Malaysian companies? So those are the kind of questions that perhaps Thomas can look at. Of course, we have Professor Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, the Chief Scientist Officer at Cancer Research Malaysia. Dr. Teo is a Cambridge graduate. And she has won the prestigious Royal Society Dorothy Hodgkin Research Fellowship to continue her work with the University of Cambridge. And of course, after that, she came back to Malaysia and was appointed as a adjunct professor at UM, and was awarded a bunch of awards. Right now, she's looking at how CRM can actually move ahead when it comes to assisting product market fit and how the biotech as well as medtech businesses can actually reach to market a little bit better than before. Also joining us is Professor Dato IR Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, the Vice Chancellor at UM. And of course, everybody knows who Prof. Hamdi is, a true blue academician. He was also formerly the Dean of Engineering, the Deputy VC. On top of that, he was a visiting professor at UCLA back in 2015-2016. There's a lot of items when it comes to the triple helix model that we can ask Prof. Hamdi later on, particularly when it comes to how do we train future graduates and see what the market needs right now. And of course, Zulera, I think it's important for us to note that while she has done a lot of things, the most important thing here right now is on how she is spearheading the mandate to transform the company into a premier tech park. And that's all that needs to be, I guess, highlighted, particularly from Zulera's end, largely because she's a rather known entity in this sector. For you watching, we are at 2:55 on 14th of Feb, a beautiful day, Valentine's Day. And we are going to answer a few questions. Number one, Maranti is actually pushing forward return on ideas, also called ROI. And of course, this is to drive the outcome and impact focus. We are trying to see if the return on ideas, that is a concept that Maranti is looking for, can push forward for speed, for synergy, for scalability. And we need to understand how we can achieve the need for speed to build engines of growth, the need of synergy to see if we can process and collaborate better. And of course, we need to see if we can scale, or scalability, i.e. adoption and results oriented for sustainable impact, an impact that can actually go on for quite a bit. Those are the kind of items that we are going to look at over the next 1 hour. Now, you can join us in this conversation every 10 minutes or so. We're going to pop up the link for you to ask questions directly to the panelists. And we really encourage you to have these two-way dialogue, because we really need to know what you think about the kind of ideas that we're sharing right now. We don't want to be speaking to an echo chamber, and we want to make sure that whatever that you have in your mind is being addressed by this illustrious panel that we have today. So without much further ado, maybe we've heard a little bit on from Zulera. Just to do a quick one before we toss to the other panelists. Let's look at the first question, right? We've seen how this isn't the first attempt by the government to set up a commercialization agency. What is different this time around, or what should be different, Zulera?
Thank you, Ibrahim, and welcome everyone. I'm very flattered and very honored that all these illustrious panel members have decided to join us today, giving their time of day. So thank you very much. And for all of you who are, listening and tuning into us today, thank you very much. I think I will start off by saying that it is not a new entity, MRANTI, or what we call it, the Malaysian Research Accelerator for Tech and Innovation. It is a result of a merger between two entities which have been around within the ecosystem for a while. So it's the Malaysian Global Innovation Creativity Center, which is focused very much on entrepreneurship programs for startups, market access, and very program-centric. And then you have the Technology Park Malaysia, which is an entity that has been around in Malaysia, in the central region, since 1996, right? So Technology Park has vast land bank, as well as infrastructure and incubation facility. It was set out as an STI park to help catalyze technology and innovation, if you like, right? So our tech and innovation hub actually has been around since 1996. Okay, so it's not a new initiative. Government has always been focused on driving commercialization, technology, and innovation for the country. However, our issue has been that this whole process is not something that is actively managed. When I say actively managed, it is somewhat disintegrated, right? So we have multiple partners or multiple entities doing multiple things, but not coming together, right? So the purpose of bringing these two entities together is to reduce or break down the silos, if you like, reduce overlaps, because essentially TPM and Magic, candidly put, at one point, were doing about the same thing, right? So instead of two agencies getting funding from the government and using the same amount of resources to do something that is going to create the same outcome, we might as well combine them and create efficiencies, right? So that's what MRANTI is all about, right? So what we've decided to do is reprioritize, look at what are the key gaps in the industries, which is really around the commercialization rate, talent pool around technology, the looking at key industries or key technology clusters that needs to be developed in order for us to achieve that high tech, high income, advanced nation status. That's essentially what we're supposed to do, right? So I guess it's really about pushing R&D from where it is right now, which is why we adopted this concept called the quadruple helix. You mentioned about the triple helix, which Prof. Hamdi championed before. So we've got something called the quadruple helix, which more and more entities are working towards, where we will bring the academia, the private sector, the startup community, and the government, link everyone, and we will be the bridge. So we are no experts in technology. What we will do is connect and ensure collaboration happens and ensure that the value chain is connected. So we will ensure that the broken bridge is connected.
You know, this is quite critical, because while we need a greater amount of collaboration, we want to see whether or not this collaboration can actually happen in real time, and without much friction. Maybe we can ask Thomas, because as a venture builder and as an entity that has been here for quite a bit, do you, I guess, celebrate these kind of creation, and therefore do you think that this is going to work well when it comes to building ventures here in Malaysia?
First of all, thanks. Ibrahim, great question. Before I jump into that, I just want to say it's an absolute pleasure. This is really one of the most distinguished panels I've been on. So glad to be with all of you. I think, Ibrahim, for your question, absolutely. I think as a venture capital firm, we welcome any initiatives and that encourage more collaboration, more communication. As a VC firm, early stage especially, we have to work and we welcome partnerships. And I think what Maranti is doing here, especially under Zulaira's leadership, bringing together various stakeholders that many times in the past weren't necessarily talking to each other, and putting them together in one community, getting interaction going. I think that's fantastic. And I think there's good things happening. I think this will only accelerate because, as the minister said, Malaysia is going to get 5 unicorns in 5 years. So we got to get working. And I'm just delighted to be part of this panel this afternoon, especially on Valentine's Day. So I feel the love. I feel the love on this panel already. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether they purposely chose this date, but it's a good date, an auspicious date to work on. Dr. Teo, let's bring in your expertise right now, because there's no better time than now when it comes to the development of biotech, medtech research, and how we can actually push forward for, building solutions that can actually be addressed globally. How do you see this coming to shape, particularly when we have that quadruple helix, as Zulaira was talking about? VCs like Gobi Partners is actually quite excited about. Maybe you could share with us your views on this.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and thank you again to Zulaira and the panel for inviting me to be part of this. I think let's not dance around the real facts, right? The real facts are that Malaysia is not well known for its innovation, and we have really struggled in terms of getting the universities to be at a level that our population even believes in them in terms of academic forefront and so on. So what we've done in Cancer Research Malaysia is really to try and put Malaysia on the world map to ensure that we're not seen to be such laggards in the world of research. And we've done that. We've published papers in New England Journal of Medicine. We have a paper that's just come out in Journal of Clinical Oncology, papers in Nature Genetics, and so on and so forth. We've done that. But to go from academic achievement to commercialization and solutions, it's actually a leap of faith and something that's completely different. And it's not up to the university alone to be able to drive that agenda. Ultimately, if you leave it to academics, we're really going to be pursuing the latest in technology. We have a heart for doing it because it may benefit the population, but we may not know the how. So until we're able to really cross that bridge and bring together not just the universities, but entrepreneurs, the VCs, the funding structures, the policy makers, and ultimately the voice of the people that we're trying to benefit, until we're able to do that, unfortunately, much of the research is going to stay in an academic environment and not actually out there in the real world, benefiting the communities that we all want to be able to benefit.
Prof. Hamdi, it's important what Dr. Teo said was talking about, but also I just want to ask you specifically, right? Many years ago, when I first learned about the triple helix model, they were actually reorienting how researchers and the university is trying to produce solutions. They're looking for market-driven solutions. And the question now is whether or not this should be the way forward when it comes to universities collaborating with the rest of the stakeholders. And now the quadruple helix model here. Should we focus on niche technologies or perhaps mission-based research? In your opinion, some are saying that researchers shouldn't be attempting anything that takes more than 5 years to produce results. What's your take on all this? Basically, let's not have the mad scientist approach. Let's focus on what is needed by the market right now.
Brian, thank you so much. Thank you to the panel for having me as well. This question has been there for quite a while, where should we actually focus on fundamental discovery type of research, or should we then focus more on the applied research? The discussion will not go anywhere because there are huge differences in researchers' interests and the expertise, the discipline. For example, those working in particle physics, for example, it's going to be quite tough to get anything out of the particle physics for commercialization directly. But we need to understand that in university particularly and research institute, there are a whole spectrum of research activities comprising research from the fundamental discovery type, novel type of research, and the applied research. So we need to allow them to do that because they actually provide the backbone of science and technology of the country. If we look at, for example, the artificial intelligence, the first ever paper being published related to AI, artificial intelligence, was found in 1943. That was a computer model of neural network, which is probably the birth of artificial intelligence, 60 years down the road. I know that is a long time, but those are the fundamental research which really become a discovery that changed the world. We have IR 4.0, which is primarily the AI-based things. So we cannot discount the importance of discovery work, fundamental research. What we are talking about today is probably the research component, which is more on applied research, extremely important. There are two areas in applied research. One is the research which is industrial driven, that you mentioned just now, Ibrahim. Another one is very much driven by the interest of the researcher. I think this is the thing that we want to corner, so that the pure research coming from researcher should at least be tailor-made towards what the nation requires, what the industry needs, or what the government needs. So this is the shift, if I may say, in the applied science, where we need the researcher to understand that it is not purely what you like to do, because you like to do what you wish to do, go ahead. But when it comes to providing grant, for example, when it comes to providing support and resources, we need to ensure that the direction of the research has to be strategic enough to fulfill the need of the nation, particularly the industry, and also the need of the people as well. So I think these are the issues. So should it be then 5 years? Yeah, probably for the discovery, go ahead, but not for the applied research, which has to be within that. It cannot be too long, because most of the time, if it goes beyond 5 years, then it sounds like very much fundamental and applied research. Discovery type of research. So in the area of applied research, it has to be probably within that 5 years. Yes.
Any of the panelists want to add to what Prof. Hamdi was talking?
I think it's very important. I agree with Prof. Hamdi that there is a bottom-up approach. So, for example, researchers like me and my team might have spent years studying the immune profiles of cancer patients to try and understand what's different between cancer cells and normal cells, and from that develop a cancer vaccine that's now ready to go into clinical trials. And you have to ask, with that patent portfolio, which is owned by Malaysians, and then developed further into a product that can go into the clinic, how do we take that forward? Should we leave it to the academics and the scientists to actually drive that? Or is it about creating new companies and new entities that you enable that to be licensed or commercialized in a new way? And that requires a different solution. The reality is that, great academic institutes, Harvard's, Cambridge, Oxford's, etc., Stanford's, and so on, have not just the great academic units that are doing the fundamental research that Hamdi talks about, but also they actually have incubators that enable them to commercialize the research. And it's that commercialization environment that's actually absolutely required in Malaysia. just working from experience, our cancer vaccine is now in some difficulty because of the valley of death, right? The really difficult situation of finding the amount of money that we need for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. And the biotech space, unfortunately, is one in which it is high risk, but also very high returns. Potentially you're talking about potential market of, let's say, $2 billion US. But in order to be able to get there, you need to put up an investment of several hundred million US. And it's really whether Malaysia as a country actually, or let alone any individual company, has that capacity to be able to pick up and bridge that gap in order for us to go commercial. And I think it requires actually a very firm understanding that in different sectors, biotech is very different from what it is in batteries, and it might be also very different from what it might look like in industrial biotech and so on. The timelines are different, the quantums are different, but also the return on investment is significantly different. So I agree with Hamdi. I think we really shouldn't focus entirely on just trying to pigeonhole things and say it's fundamental or it's applied. Actually, most things are probably a bit of both, but we need to make sure that we have some way in which things don't get stuck in an academic environment, but we have enablers that enable the real solutions to be to have the due diligence and the pathways created so that they can go commercial, so that our vaccine can eventually benefit the low-income patients for whom we started the project in the first place. Our inspiration was to make a therapy that will be available for low-income patients, low-income cancer patients. And God forbid, eventually we develop a therapy that's so expensive that nobody can afford it, right? So we need to make sure that we're able to, go that whole journey from a Malaysian context.
Thomas, maybe you can add a bit, because that element of trying to solve a problem versus the pain that you guys face. You guys have LPs, you guys have your own masters to answer to, and therefore you guys have to chase after the returns on your investment. How do you ensure that all these lofty ideals can be addressed, particularly from the researchers and the startups and the stakeholders, people like Zulaira and Maranti and all that, while at the same time making money? Because at the end of the day, you guys have to make money, or else what's the raison d'etre, right? I mean, how do you ensure that those kind of tussling of interests can be further aligned in order to fit your commercialization end?
Great points, and I'd love to address what Dr. Teo said, and maybe just talk a little bit about Gobi's journey. Actually, and Zulaira knows this, when Gobi first started, one of the first funds I created back in China, actually one of the first investors and partners we had was Tsinghua University. Mm-hmm. And this was back in 1998, 99, all right, when the China VC scene was just starting. We felt very fortunate, but again, that was a clear example where we brought in, financial LPs, corporates, but also the university. And the reason why is we really worked very closely together with Tsinghua and their entire network of world-class experts. Okay, it was so from those origins, and I'm sure many of you know, Ibrahim, so we started off in China. We've grown today now. We've got 13 locations, and everything I'm about to say is all in ringgit, right? We have 6.3 billion now assets under management, right? I just want to share some stats that could be interesting. So from 2018 to 2021, the last 4 years, we've generated 23 exits. We've returned ringgit 1.2 billion back to our investors. We've invested in 212 financing rounds. So we deployed ringgit about 833 million. And here's what's fascinating. I think this addresses Dr. Teo's point. We invested 833 million ringgit, but of the money we put out into our new investments, those companies then had another 117 up rounds, and they raised almost 17 billion ringgit. So you can see the multiplier effect, right? When an early stage VC comes in. Now that's across the entire platform. In just Malaysia alone, and I think this would interest the audience, is we've invested now in 27 early stage startups in Malaysia. My point is, and I think this is going to be asked, is Gobi, we put our ASEAN headquarters in Malaysia. We are now one of the biggest investors, 27 startups. I was so glad to see Camarul, Aerodyne in there. Jalira's already mentioned Carsum. I think we've got other unicorns like Clarence at Easy Parcel, right? Policy Street, Reinventing InsurTech. These are all Malaysian companies, you know, fantastic. I think we're going to address the talent issue. And so, like, you know, I did some research on Professor Teo. She coming back from Cambridge, it gives me great hope. There's no shortage of talent in Malaysia. And I think as a VC firm, we're very much ready to collaborate with the universities. And I think what Maranti is doing is really putting in that third leg of the tripod. I call it the iron tripod. Corporates, government, and universities. In the past, quite frankly, Gobi, you know, I'm a guest here in Malaysia. Never got to really meet the university. So this is a fantastic opportunity. It's a model we've done. In Hong Kong, we work with Hong Kong U, UST, Chinese universities. I'd love to see that happen more here. And we can help because, as Dr. Teo was saying, look, VCs, we don't understand that much about technology. I don't really know much about cancer research. But I tell you what, if we think it has potential, there's only two things we can do as a VC. We can put in some capital, and the most important thing is we give it some credibility, and we'll market the crap out of it. We'll make sure it gets onto the world stage. And I think that's something, again, working together with Maranti, University of Malaya, these are all good things. And again, I think we've got some proven cases. So, you know, love to be able to do more on that.
Zulera, there's an opportunity for us to build on policy as well. Some, you know, I guess market changing solutions require laws to be updated, intellectual property laws, maybe suitability of product to its market, in terms of shortening clinical trials, for instance. Those are the kind of things that I think of on top of my head. Who would be the best person when it comes to addressing policy changes when it comes to these? Sorry, I'm losing touch on the thing. There's an iron tripod, there's a triple helix, there's a quadruple helix, and God knows all the other parables that we get eventually over the next 1 hour. But we get the idea. Somebody has to talk to the government when it comes to changing policies. Do you feel that Maranti is that role?
Yeah. So it's a tall order, right? I think before we claim anything, I just like to put it out there that it's a very tall order. But we are trying as best as we can to ensure that we are that link. Ultimately, we are a government agency, we are government. So our role is to bring together as many people that are necessary to make meaningful change. And those meaningful change sometimes can be small changes, right? Which can be meaningful. So I think that's what we're trying to do. Again, policy remains one of the biggest hurdles in terms of bringing products to market. Regulations still remain one of the biggest hurdles in Malaysia. And I think admittedly, in fact, a lot of the regulators would admit this, that we are somewhat behind, right? But it's not that the regulators do not want to do anything about it. They also require some amount of hand-holding and understanding of where the industry is heading. Because to be fair to the regulators, they need to look into safety, right? Liability issues. Now, these are the primary responsibilities of regulators, which they cannot, set aside. So I think what we have to also address is the fact that all parties, let's take into account the quadruple helix model. Everyone needs to play their roles. Everyone needs to pull in their weight in order to make this happen, right? So maybe, if you like, we are the glue, right? We will start by pulling at one point, and then we will expand that. Because again, we are just one entity, right? We are representing the ministry. We hope that the ministry will be able to do this. I think the ministry has been fantastic in terms of pushing us forward. In fact, we are here because the ministry has put their minds together to say that, we need a consolidated, cohesive approach towards commercialization. Now, I think the other point that I also want to drive around the R&D in itself, right? Around 80% of research in Malaysia happens in higher learning institutions, happens in the academia, happens in the universities. Now, but that is where the silo actually happens, right? So which is why I think, based on what Prof. Hamdi and Dr. Teo just mentioned, coming back to the point that Thomas also mentioned, that the link is not there at the moment. Given that all of the research actually happens in the academia, they're not actually seeing the light at the end of the tunnel because there's no link in between. Right? Many of the researchers also come to us asking how can their products be seen by VCs? How can investors consider their product? Can you give us a pitching opportunity? Can you connect us to, funding platforms? Can you tell us where we can get dana pengkomersialan, for example? So we get all sorts of questions. But at the same time, we are also not experts in these technologies. So what we do is bring experts together, bring funding institutions together, bring academia together. So more and more, we have to get everyone in the room. And this is not something that can happen today. Right? This has to happen periodically, more frequently, over time, and in the most structured manner. Right? Of course, we then have to work towards meaningful outcome and meaningful impact. Right? So we're also working very closely with the Research Management Institute, which is actually under the Economic Planning Unit, that actually is tasked to channeling research funds. Right? So we will have to work very closely with RMU to ensure funding goes in the right direction. Right? You mentioned something around mission-oriented approach. I think it's very important for us to work towards problem statements, work towards missions that are important for the country, right? I think many countries around the world have already adopted this model. So it is now our time to take a more integrated approach towards this mission-oriented approach. And these problems need to come from the industry. These problems need to come from the VCs. The VCs must tell us, look, these are the areas I'm looking to invest. These are the areas that, the highest ROI is in terms of monetary returns. And this is where R&D should be heading. And then we can direct those kind of data or inputs to the academia. So I think what's missing right now is that dialogue, is that interlink between these parties. I think I'll just stop there.
It seems like, Thomas, you want to add something, particularly on the issue on talent, Thomas?
No, I was about to say, I think what Zulaira said was, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, meeting the Vice Chancellor and Professor Teo here is fantastic. I mean, look, from Gobi's standpoint, again, I think COVID was a real wake-up call, right? And I agree with Vice Chancellor Hamdi. Again, a lot of this fundamental research goes back decades. But, if COVID has shown us anything, is, hey, we may be running out of time. So I actually think, and I think what government agencies can do, Zulaira, is setting these, audacious moonshots. I mean, I remember President Kennedy. I mean, it's like, we're going to put a man on the moon. Nobody thought that was possible. I think for Professor Teo, and I'd get behind this. In fact, that's what Gobi wants to do is, hey, why can't we find a cure for cancer in 10 years? I mean, I know, look, maybe I'm oversimplifying it. And again, but that's what VCs think. I mean, for Vice Chancellor Hamdi, it's like, hey, again, for research, I think Malaysia should focus on research where it has a competitive advantage. Let's say in the ag tech or palm oil. I mean, can you use palm oil byproducts and make compostable packaging materials? And I think, again, that was a great example where the Malaysian government is going to ban single-use plastics. Because I'll tell you a funny story. I sort out my plastic bottles every day at work and at home. And then I see, the cleaning people at the end of the day taking all the trash, paper, metal, and plastic, and then throwing them all together, and it goes into the garbage truck anyway. So that's not going to be the way to solve, right, the pollution problem. I think it's going to take a concerted government, corporate. I mean, the government's going to have to say, listen, nobody can use a damn plastic bottle. Go figure out something else. Everybody's going to be on the same playing field. And you know what? That's where the research money is going to go. And then somebody's going to come up with a solution. So back to, one question I just want to throw it out for discussion is, I think in academia, there's a famous saying, which is, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. I think in academia right now, the issue is so much of it becoming an academic. I think there's two things. One is, and I really respect this, academics sometimes think making money is a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. It shows you that your research has impact, right? I think right now the incentives for universities often is how many times your papers are published and if you're going to win a Nobel Prize. So I think Vice Chancellor Hamdi, if you make it add in another kind of requirement, which is, hey, you know what, they got to talk to a VC, how many of their ideas actually get commercialized, I think you're going to see a lot of your top researchers seeing their ideas converted into startups, or they got to work with a startup to be considered a professor. Again, I'm just tossing these ideas out there, but I've always believed, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. If there's a way to like what Maranti is doing, connecting kind of the VC world with the academic university world, magic can happen. You can catch lightning in a bottle.
I want to pick up on one of the things that Tom says that I absolutely agree with, which is be very clear what is Malaysia's value proposition, right? I think we have to be absolutely crystal clear with that. And it doesn't matter whether it's in applied science or in basic science, we need to be very clear what value are we bringing to the table that outcompetes everybody else. And there's not that many areas where we are able to claim that. So let's make sure that at least in those areas we do tremendously well so that we can really get and stay ahead of the game. So where Cancer Research Malaysia has focused is the world of cancer research is huge. So to be able to have an audacious claim like having a cure for cancer in the next 10 years, well, President Nixon declared that a year after Kennedy or 2 years after Kennedy declared that we're going to put a man on the moon and did, Nixon said that we're going to cure cancer. And that was in 1970. And that didn't happen in that generation, right? The cancer survival improved, doubled in fact, but we didn't cure cancer. We didn't cure all types of cancer. So President Biden recently announced a moonshot program to find a cure for cancer after his son was affected by brain cancer. But the reality is Malaysia needs to look at that and ask, what value do we bring to that equation? So for Cancer Research Malaysia, we've noted that today, Asians make up 47% of the cancer cases, but nearly 60% of the deaths due to cancer. And of all of the research that is conducted in the world, less than 10% takes place in Asians. So the cancers which are common in Asia are neglected. The genetics, the environment, the microbiome that influences our risk to disease as well as our response to cancer treatments is just neglected. So that becomes our niche. Our goal is to ensure that we have 10 new therapies for cancers that are based in Asians by 2030. We're already at 4. We only have 6 more to go, and hopefully that will be my retirement, but we'll take that for another day. But in addition, it's about precision medicine. How do we make sure that we can bring precision medicine to the Asian population? We said that we'll bring forward 10 biomarkers. We're at 2, and we're making progress. So I think one of the things that Tom has picked up on, which I think I really would like to emphasize, it's to have that vision of where it is that you want to go. And an image that actually captures what the vision is and mapping out how you're going to get there is a key part of success in Malaysia. The challenge has been that it's not been that we are not good at setting out those maps. If you think about Pemandu and the priorities put onto the agriculture industry or to palm oil or the healthcare, tourism, and so on, all of that work has been done. But what has happened is there's been direction change. After 5 years, things change. After 3 years, sometimes things change. We don't have that consistency to stay with that particular policy to ensure you can see it through. And maybe that's where CRM-wise or Cancer Research Malaysia's success has come from. The fact that I've been here for a long time, the fact that I've got many people in the team that have been here for a long time, the fact that we've had partners walk with us over the last 20 years has been what has enabled us to get to this point and where others may have really struggled. It's not necessarily just about policy change, but making sure that we have consistent policy for long enough to ensure success. And I think that's really important.
Prof. Hamdi, do you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to highlight that when we talk about the research, especially the research that can be commercialized, especially we were talking about how we can actually push research findings or output into commercialization. A lot of time, traditionally, when a researcher wants to do something, it is purely based on interest. I'm interested in this, I will do it, and then, okay, I got an outcome, say a device, for example, that can really function well. It's an innovation. And I patent it, and then I start searching for VCs, angel investors, to see, okay, which industry is interested. And then I got frustrated saying that, wow, nobody's interested. The industries are not ready for such technology. It is just too alien or too different. We are just not, the business is not just ready for that. So this is happening a lot in the academia. And how do we actually stop this waste, if I may say? Because eventually it just sits on the shelf and nobody actually pick it up. Therefore, what we are talking about today is actually engaging stakeholders, particularly the industry at the very early stage in research, so that researchers, inventors do not do things without this input, so that they will not waste their output. So I think if this can be done properly, and it is not difficult at all, it's just requiring a bit of strategic and also a structured way of doing things in academia. And I believe that, you know, the industry and even the business are willing to come and share. If this is done, and we are doing it now in the university, I believe we are going to get a very different outcome in 3 to 5 years' time, where research output is really relevant to industry, to businesses, and they will be very happy to pick it up, rather than, you know, looking at something which is very, very good, very noble and novel, but yet can't be used or just not ready to be used. So I think this is just bringing people together. We have been talking about this, bringing people together, let them talk and understand the need, the gap, and then the academia will try their best to actually fit in whatever the gap is. So I think this is probably the amicable solution on issues that we are talking about, the mismatch, if I may say, between research and what the industry require, or what the society require, or what the government require.
Yeah.
Ibrahim, if I can just add to Prof.
Go on.
Hamdi's point. Yeah, so essentially what he's talking about is the match between demand and supply, which essentially what we're trying to do. So we've tried this in the past, fairly successful, but the thing is, we lack that sort of collaboration from the university. What we have is something called the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. So we've managed to open this up to startups and those that are dabbling in technology and want to set up entities and require facilitation in terms of regulations, technology adoption, as well as funding. So we have this platform where they can apply into, right? Now, that is our supply. But in order to ascertain demand, we've got something called the Grand Challenge, because I think it's important to understand what the market needs. But we are starting from what the government needs, because most often than not, the government also looks, or rather at this point in time, look to technology and innovation as a core model to solve issues, right? So we want those problem solving to be done by local technologies, local entities. So this platform creates that match. So what we essentially want to do with MRANTI is expand that platform for it to reach the academia and the wider demand, which is the private sector, government, and the international market for that matter. But that journey can be connected through investors like Thomas, right? Where he can be able to get first dibs, as you say, you know, in critical research areas or critical supplies, if you like. Yeah.
I just like to point something out. I think it's really important that academics and researchers know what industry wants, but we also need to be very wary about time frame, right? And that time frame can be an absolute killer. Because I think when industry knows what they want to buy it and they want to have it now because they want to maintain that competitive edge. But academia works on a very different timeline.
Absolutely.
The reality is that, you know, we always need to choose between three things. You either want it fast, you want it good, or you want it cheap. The trouble in Malaysia is that we always want to choose all three things. And invariably, the thing that we always drop is good, because we want fast and cheap, drop the good. And that's not the way to be competitive in the long term. The way to be competitive in the long term requires people who don't just understand what industry needs now, but what industry will need in 5 years' time before industry even knows that need themselves. And to know what that type of researcher is and to build a talent pool that can actually predict what it is that industry needs and can figure out the trends of where that particular industry is going, that's not so easy. You know, to try and have that conversation with industry today and say, okay, what is your immediate pain point? Your immediate pain point may be that you can't bring in the foreign workers and therefore you've got fruits rotting on your tree. I need something that will harvest the fruit. Sure, that's a short-term need. But actually, what's the thing that the industry needs in 5 years' time is not the same as what they're going to describe to you today. And I think where the university needs to get better at, researchers need to get better at, is making the strategic plan to give you a longer term view so that you have a chance to invest on developing that are good, that takes a longer time, and that are more affordable. So the focus for the future should be on good and affordable, not just cheap and fast, because cheap and fast ain't no good.
Okay, we're going to be moving towards the questions from the audience section in a bit. But coming in from the I guess knowledge and entertainment industry, I've met a few producers both on Netflix as well as Hollywood. They were talking about the two types of script writers that exist on this planet. The first is a script writer that writes stories that are going to do well. If you think about it, things like Red Notice on Netflix. But then there are other storytellers that really take their time, 10, 15 years in the making, and then you have something like Squid Game. And it's important for us to understand that you can't, there's just as how Prof. Hamdi started off, there's no one way of solving this. But if you approach this in a portfolio of events, you're going to be able to actually address the commercial aspect of things while trying to see if some research that really mean a lot to these researchers get to the market. So yes, there's a lot of issues when it comes to solving one solution, but if you approach it the way the entertainment industry does, perhaps we can see a lot more progress when it comes to science and tech as well. Okay, we're going to be taking the first question. The first question is on basically asking Thomas, what's really hot right now? What would be the kind of industries that you would throw your money at and scream at them and ask them to run faster?
Well, I think right now it's a great question. I think, well, we split it into two, right? I think, right now, I mean, fintech continues to be a very attracting a lot, again, especially around financial inclusion. And then I think the other one, broadly speaking, is this whole, the whole interest around ESG, right? I think COVID has really demonstrated that. So again, we're in some of the biotech companies. Again, this might be interesting for Professor Teo. Companies like Prenetics in Hong Kong. We've just invested into another company called Great Bay Bio, which again is focusing on AI for clinical research. But increasingly, we're looking at the world's biggest problems. So again, we don't look at it around just sectors anymore. It's really what are the big problems facing humanity and how are we going to solve them, right? So again, around climate change, everybody's looking at that because we can be the world's most successful venture firm, but if there's no planet to be living on, I mean, what's the point? Again, that's why I feel like there's this urge for research. You gotta have a balance between kind of long-term and short-term. I feel the urge because if there is this limited time frame, we got to start deploying. The rainy day is here, right? We got to start deploying it now, and that's why at Gobi we feel like there's this urgency. So again, around circular economy, I think that is a huge area of focus for us, right? Especially in how do we deal with plastics, replacement substitutes for that. Around the social. Julara knows this. I mean, we're big believers in the whole Taqwa Tech framework. How do we include and empower more, 1.8 billion Muslim community, and how do we empower entrepreneurs to serve their kind of digital needs? And just uplifting, right, huge parts of humanity. I mean, these are the big issues we're looking at, and we're trying to make. I mean, we can't do it by ourselves. We can only make a very small impact. But with every dollar that we put in, if we can make that change, that's really what we're looking at.
Still on Thomas, Asian countries like Korea, Japan, Taiwan have built their own global tech companies which drive demand for their local innovation. Where do you see Malaysia's strength or challenges would be?
Well, I think you're gonna have a couple of these unicorns coming out already, right? I mean, I think you get a couple of unicorns coming. The the spin-off effect, right? When a company is successful, like an Aerodyne or a Carsum or an Easy Parcel, right? When they come out, people become successful, they spin out the knowledge that they've learned. It gets recirculated back into the Malaysian tech ecosystem, right? And if you think about it, a lot of the Malaysian entrepreneurs were built off the backs of really the first generation of Malaysian tech entrepreneurs, right? The guys like at Job Street. Think about what AirAsia did. There's all these entrepreneurs. You know, entrepreneurs build off of waves. And they don't just magically appear. And so I think with every success story here, it will only, you know, lay the foundation for future success stories. And that's why I think, again, what Maranti is doing, accelerating that. You know, Malaysia's in a race with all the other countries, you know, around Southeast Asia. So, you know, I think what Maranti is doing is fantastic and very much needed right now.
Okay. Dr. Teo, one question to you, or for you. Malaysia is known as the country of hubs. There's a lot of hubs going on in Malaysia. To answer your issue of, we need to know our strength, our purpose very clearly, our role very, very clearly. How do you help us see clearly what our purpose is?
I think I'm very one-dimensional. I'm an expert in cancer and in genetics, and that's I suppose my life's mission, right? To ensure that people don't die of disease because they are poor, people don't die of disease because there's under research, and that we're finding better ways in which we can focus. So what we have found is that there's one singular problem, which is that Asians are being left out. So we need to focus on finding ways in which we can make that a solution. And by consistently putting that message out there, consistently making sure that we actually make progress in that area, we seem to be making an impact, right? And so my advice to people out there would be to, especially to young people out there, is to be clear as to not just kind of keep jumping ship, if you like, but stick to one thing that you can be an expert in and find different ways in which you can solve the problem. When we first started, we were just dealing with cell biology. We're now having AI, big tech, data, you know, digital health. We also have patient innovations that we are working on. So it's about, in a sense, being consistent with what it is what is the big picture problem that you want to solve, and how do you use the most appropriate technology to attack it from all fronts. And I think that sense, I think, is really important if we're going to make an impact moving forward.
This question is for both Prof. Hamdi as well as Dr. Teo. Has anyone in the panel actually taken a lead and drive technology from a lab through startup all the way to exit? Do you have skin in the game? And that was all the entirety of the question, but I would like to add, do you know of anyone who has done this, and what would be some of the learnings from that?
Yeah. We're not there yet. So our patent was licensed last year. So this is a patent for a cancer vaccine. It was licensed to a biotech company last year. We've completed the first preclinical study. Second preclinical will finish this year. And if everything goes well, phase 1 clinical trial will start end of this year, beginning of next. But biotech has got very long, especially for pharmaceuticals, has got fairly long gestation period. So it's probably going to be about 7 years before we can exit. So 5 to 7 years before we can exit that one. We have more recently filed a patent for a biomarker that predicts treatment for an innovative drug. That biomarker is currently being tested in clinical trials. So the trial will open hopefully in the next month or so. We've already got a patent position with that. We're hoping to be able to license it to a number of diagnostic companies. So we're going to be exploring that in the next 18 months or so, as soon as we get initial results from that clinical trial. So I would say that no, I don't have the experience as a single entity to have gone through the whole exit strategy, to kind of go from several rounds of Series A, Series B, etc. But we, as a startup that kind of started with pure science and discovery, I think we're actually doing not bad. We're doing not bad at all in terms of actually putting Malaysia on the map, creating some resources that will enable more research to take place, and then actually creating some IP that will hopefully enable commercialization to also take place.
Right, if I may share some of the experience in the university. I know that some other universities, research university particularly, are also having the same experience as UM as well. We are kind of still experimenting with what is the best model to move forward when it comes to commercialization. Allow me to just elaborate a bit what I said just now. Traditionally, what the universities in Malaysia has been doing is that whenever you have a patent, say for example, you are actually asking the researcher, the professor, to actually spin off and open up the company. This has been the traditional way of Malaysian universities, and I have seen a lot of this goes into failure, either fast or a couple of years down the road. The sustainability is very, very tough. Hence, I think it's important for university. We're now in Malaysia looking at this model very, very seriously. We do not think this is a workable model. The researchers are not businessmen. They are not supposed to open up companies. They should actually build their capacity in research, continuously providing the research output. And when it comes to patent it, yeah, but when we want to take it through to the business world, it should be done by someone else, not by the professor himself, because we have seen a lot of failure. Of course, we have some small, very, very small success, but honestly, it's a lot of struggling because being an academic is a full-time work. Being a businessman is of course requiring full-time rather than you can do both. You are really a superman. So the way I look at it, the model that has been ventured by university is not successful. And what we are now looking at, another model in this area, is to seriously look at the entire value chain. Again, the researcher come out with a patent, with an invention, or even an innovation, but we need to get the investors, either angel investors or the VC, venture capitals, to come in. But at the same time, we require a management group to actually take up this to another level, not the researcher. The researcher can maintain as the advisor, or even the consultant, or even having an equity and be in the board, but not as an active executive running the show, which we thought can happen. We have tried that many times, not only one university, many other universities. And quite often we are not very successful. We may be successful in the business, but the researcher life as an academic is basically shattered because he doesn't have that much time to do both. A researcher required to continuously push the boundary of research and keep on developing the technology further. So again, that's number one issue, which I think is very, very important for university to come up with a proper model. Number two is the function of our tech transfer office, which is very crucial actually. And quite often they are not having the required skill to transform these findings and pattern into commerciable, entity. It requires a little bit of different skills. And a lot of time, our tech transfer office behave as administrative officers rather than as professionals, able to really tell us, the researchers, saying that, okay, this kind of research work has got market potential. It's not an easy thing to do. They might not be able to do so, actually. So we need to up the game a bit, make sure that the tech office, the tech transfer office is having the required skill, plus the model that I mentioned initially. And I think by engaging the stakeholders at the early stage, before even we do the research, I think these ingredient will most probably will bear fruits. Of course, there are a lot more initiative. We are talking about ecosystem, right? We are building the ecosystem where people can actually come and say, I have a lot of interest in pushing this into the market. I need the group to actually bring this to the management group. I need the money to do that. I need the business partner to actually propel it. So these are the things.
Dr. Teo wants to jump in?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Teo, go.
No, I didn't want to interrupt, Prof. Prof. Hamdi.
I'm sorry, my job is to interrupt, and we only have 3 more minutes. So please, Dr. Teo.
No, I just wanted to say that, what Prof. Hamdi is pointing out has got some truth, which is that academics cannot put forward commercialization in Malaysia, in part because the infrastructure and the support system that's necessary for them to succeed simply does not exist in Malaysia. So when I worked in the University of Cambridge, my boss actually set up a biotech company. He was a successful Cambridge professor, as well as he set up a company. He commercialized it, went through 2 rounds, sold it for a lot of money, set up another company, and you could say he's a serial entrepreneur. If you ask him why is it that he succeeded, it's because he had a successful tech transfer office. He had a successful chief executive that was able to support him accordingly. So Malaysian professors not being able to succeed is not because they're not the right people to take it to commercialization. It's just that they're expected to fulfill the role of a chief scientist, a chief executive, a chief financial officer, and sometimes the person who actually mops the floor in order for their commercial company to succeed. And I think we really need to recognize that for success in these industries, you need to not just build that academic scientist who can take forward the idea, but you need to have all of the other expertise in order to be able to ensure that the ecosystem is right for that company, that idea to succeed.
And I think this is, I'd love to jump in here. And again, I think, Professor Hamdi, Vice Chancellor, we meet so many great young entrepreneurial teams. I often laugh. I mean, young people now all want to be an entrepreneur, right? And a lot of them, though, they're like, Tom, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I just don't have an idea. I just, we could match these entrepreneurial teams with real technology. I think, what Zulaira was saying is just, I'd love, after this, Vice Chancellor, I got to get your contact info. We should schedule and talk. There's just so many easy, I think, points of collaboration. But again, back to what Professor Teo was saying, again, the top universities like the Oxford, Cambridges, Harvards, they're making it very easy, giving a lot of flexibility for professors. You have to make it easy. And again, that's where a VC can really help, is because, we've built out these teams. Gobi has a portfolio now of over 310 companies. I've seen every which way entrepreneurs have failed. So being able to share some of that with academics, I think is easy. I mean, we've had companies like, for example, we're in a company called AutoX, which does autonomous driving. That's founded by a professor out of Princeton. I mean, his name is Professor X. And so that's an example of a guy who was a professor and then came out. Right? So, we're in another company in Pakistan. And again, he also had an academic background, and he's called Dr. Potato because he's working on ag tech, linking up farmers directly to retail markets in Karachi and Lahore. So, we've got a professor and now we've got a Dr. Potato, but we've also had a lot of examples where the professors, for example, in Semicon, they just stay as an advisor, they do the research, and the reason why the startup works is because the professor has access to the deep technical research capabilities of the university. And so there's many models in how these startups can succeed, and we've seen it done many different ways. Each case is kind of unique, but what I do want to stress is there are collaboration models out there. Again, if the University of Malaya has an open mindset, take some chances. What's the worst that can happen? You fail, big deal. VCs, our failure rate's 90%. It's normal. I think that's the other thing I would say. For a lot of academics, you're doing the research and, so much is about reputation. Like they don't want to be embarrassed. As a VC, it's just like entrepreneurs fail all the time. Take a chance. If you don't put the research into real world applications, sometimes I wonder, and I just ask them, I said, it's great. Take a chance. All that taxpayer funded research needs to be tested. What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work. You just figured out a way that it doesn't work. Isn't that good?
This discourse,
the faces of Professor Hamdi and Professor Teo was like contorting when he said, "What's
Absolutely not. That's not
it's okay.
fair, Ibrahim. Absolutely not. Failure, accepting failure and growing from it is actually what makes us successful. So it's just, I think, an Asian mindset is one in which we're very, very easily embarrassed, and we should not be so easily embarrassed. Absolutely not.
Zulaira, last two questions. But before that, you want to add on to the remarks that Thomas made?
No. I was just going to say that the admissions that was made by Prof. Hamdi and Dr. Teo basically makes my life easier, because they've just admitted that the commercialization models for the university doesn't actually work at the moment, or a little, probably needs a bit of improvement. But that's where we jump in, and we want to make it better, right, Thomas?
But I do think that, Zulaira, that's an important jump in, but we have to really ask, which government agency the world over actually has succeeded in enabling commercialization to succeed. And it's actually where government has taken their hands off and enabled an environment where there's an active dialogue, and it's non-governmental led that has actually succeeded, right? And it's really not about putting people in pigeonholes. Ultimately, is to have an open mind to say there is not one solution that will work. We have to be flexible enough to accommodate different solutions. Don't say to an entrepreneur, you shouldn't do this because now we think professors should do that, and now we think this is the system. I think if we go down that track where we try and be too regimented in terms of a structure, nothing's actually going to work.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can prescribe a particular solution to this issue.
Yeah.
Final question. We'll go to Zulaira.
Yeah.
And all of us are a bit guilty of not addressing this at in the entire 1 hour that we've had with each other. How can we create a sustainable culture of creation from grassroots level, so folks like Maranti and other entities can continue their roles in the future? Culture of creation.
So I think this is a complex one. Again, culture has many roots, right? It is also a function of upbringing. It is a function of how we actually experience education. It is also a function of where we grow up, right? So I think in terms of what we can do is to enable that process of enculturation of innovation and technology happens at a very early stage. So we're looking at schools, we're looking at institutions that can enable this, right? But I think more importantly is that when you reach a certain stage, because most of us are, especially in urban setting, we are more tech savvy in that sense, right? So as Thomas mentioned, many entrepreneurs or many young kids out there, many youth, many people out there want to become entrepreneurs. Everyone wants to be a tech entrepreneur these days because they think that's where the money is, or that's how you can change the world or impact the world. So I think the trend is up and coming, especially in urban areas. But I think the challenge is, how do we get people outside the urban setting to get into this bandwagon? Because that's how we build enculturation, right? So the whole country as a nation, we should have that inbuilt within our culture. So I think we are doing a number of things at a grassroots level. We have a number of grassroots programs. Again, this is not a one agency initiative. This has to be a whole of government approach where MOSTI will work with other ministries to enable this at a grassroots level as well. So I think there are other key ministries here. There are KPT, there's KBS, the Sports and Youth Ministry. Of course, you have the higher learning, and then you have the economic planning division, the ministry. So it's a whole of government approach, I would say, right?
Okay. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. However, this conversation must keep on going. I'd like to extend my thanks to the panelists, Thomas, Dr. Teo, Prof. Hamdi, as well as Zulaira. Back to you, Selby.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Sani, and all the panelists today's forum. It was an eye-opening and insightful session. With that, we would like to invite guests involved with the breakout sessions to make your move to the designated breakout room by clicking the link given earlier. The facilitator is waiting in each of the breakout rooms, and the session will then start once everyone is in. Please reach out to our team if you need any further assistance. We'll meet you at the breakout room. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us today. But before we end, we want to hear your feedback. Please scan this QR code or click the link on the chat box and fill in this survey and let us know your thoughts. And just to highlight that all of you are welcome to have a virtual tour across our microsite to gain more insight. And if you are interested to join our next breakout session, we'll open registration soon in Maranti branch series 2, and we'll see you there. Till then, stay safe and goodbye.